With the stroke of a pen, Defence Minister Ron Mark has overruled an Environment Court decision on noise restrictions for plane engine testing at Auckland's Whenuapai Airbase. The developer Neil Group won a noise complaint case against the base in the Environment Court last month. But Ron Mark has now stepped in and used his special powers to exempt the airbase from the Resource Management Act on the grounds of national security. He says the court judgement is now meaningless and it's business as usual at Whenuapai.
People knew when they bought and moved into that area that there'd been an Air Force base there since the Second World War. People know that those aircraft are required to deploy at any time of the day or night, very often going out to search for people in peril on the sea, yachties, fishermen. They deploy to HADAR operations. Prior to deployment, they are required, which is standard aviation practice, to run their engines up and test them. That's quite aside from the testing that we might have to do after we've completed a maintenance schedule. And it's just unsafe to fly an aircraft without testing the engines before one even attempts to take off. So we have to do these things. It's part of the, it's what we do. And it's just absolutely unacceptable to think that we would have an Environment Court ruling on the back of a property developer shutting down and not being able to operate after office hours when we're required to go out and search for someone who's in trouble.
So this exemption that you're able to sign off on, it's for the purposes of national security. Well, did this warrant such a sort of high-powered exemption? Because national security, do we meet that bar for that? Because the Prime Minister gets flown out of Whenuapai sometimes when she's going into to the Pacific nations, and you have search and rescues coming from that base. Is this really an issue of national security?
I think there's a bigger question that still worries me, Lisa, and that is the whole question around encroachment and the ongoing challenges to military bases that were once set up in isolated locations, free from any sort of interference on their operations. I mean, you go back to Wigram, it was way out in the country outside of Christchurch. It eventually got built around and then shut down. A lot of it from complaints about the noise from the Harvards flying, and they were training officers, pilot officers, to fly. Look at what we're facing now down in West Melton, where we have objections to people who've moved into the area on lifestyle blocks because of the noise from the rifle. That rifle range has been there 100 years. We've got similar challenges potentially around Linton and around Burnham. If you look at the amount of growth in the Rolleston area, and I've had numerous property developers make clear that they would like to actually to put more property development out on the fringes of Burnham. All of that eventually leads to impeding the ability of our Defence Force personnel.
So this was about stopping a precedent, was it, Minister? This was about getting in early and setting some ground rules as you see it.
I have to draw a line in the sand on this one. As far as I'm concerned, I cannot have impediments to the Air Force's operations out of Whenuapai, full stop. The Air Force Base was there a long time ago. People have moved, and here's the funny thing, Lisa. It's interesting. I look at the online petition raised by the residents of Helensville, and particularly those around Whenuapai. It would appear that 17,000 people agree with me. They don't want the Air Force Base removed or shut down. They're proud of the fact that our airwomen and our airmen deploy out of there. They're proud of the work they do. They understand the importance and significance of Whenuapai to the national security and to the Defence Force. So if 17,000 people who are resident in that area support the airbases continuing in the way it always has, what's the big deal? Oh, I guess the big deal is we've got a property developer who wants to make a stack of money based on an investment in land. We've got Auckland Council who redesignated the area despite objections, and now we're in the position we're in. I'm over it.
Before you go, Minister, I'm really curious. Did Air New Zealand ever make any submissions to you on the future of that particular site?
Nothing to me at all, Lisa. I was blindsided and gobsmacked. Look, can I say that since the departure of a certain person from the employment of Air New Zealand, I've had discussions with Air New Zealand. That conversation's off the table.
It's over then, Air New Zealand's bid for an airport, second airport there?
I think Air New Zealand now are fully aware of the strength of feeling of the local community around Whenuapai as well. The reaction from local residents was immediate and furious, and I think if they were to, I just don't physically see how we could accommodate the car parking or for the taxi stands, the bus stands, let alone the security provisions needed for flying out of there, let alone a passenger terminal, let alone all of those separate facilities I just don't see how that would fit. But on top of that,
so to be clear, Minister, sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to be absolutely clear on this. You never received any kind of written submission or plan, suggestions or otherwise from Air New Zealand, formally from them, about this idea that Whenuapai could be used as a second domestic airport in New Zealand?
Not even a post-it note.
Were they ever serious about it then?
Well, someone clearly was, because he made a big deal of it in the media, and he had a hell of a lot to say. And it seemed to me that, to take the gentleman at his word, that they have done a lot of work. And I was just gobsmacked that, as I said to Air New Zealand in a private conversation, look, what you did is tantamount to someone coming up my drive and doing an assessment on what they would do with my home and my little lifestyle block. Should they decide to buy it? Should I be willing to sell it? Should they decide to have a conversation with me? I just found it all quite bizarre, quite frankly.
And that's Defence Minister Ron Mark there.